Last time, we learned that we can create a line of 3 pieces in a row, called a major threat. We learned how to simultaneously expose 2 of these threats, which can be used to win the game. However, all of our examples from last time showed us how to win quickly in the beginning, mostly in the case that the player under threat followed poor shape or poor opening decisions. On the contrary, today we will investigate how to use threats to our advantage when the opening goes exactly right. We don't necessarily need a double major threat to win. The game can be won with a smaller set of threats, because as we will learn today, not all threats are created equal. In mathematics, parity refers to the evenness or oddness of a number. We can say that 3 has odd parity and 4 has even parity. Insofar as the players alternate taking turns, we will be able to use this as a tool to analyze Connect 4 positions. We begin by noticing that the board, as a whole, has a total of exactly 42 spots to play. That means that there will be an unending chain of 42 moves, starting with red, assuming you follow the convention of red playing first, then alternating yellow, red, yellow, until the game ends with a yellow move. Not only will the last space be filled by a yellow move, but the second to last space will be filled with a red move, and the third to last will be filled with a yellow move, and so on. The results of this fact are immediate and decisive. Consider this position in which both red and yellow hold a threat on the top row, and there is no threat anywhere else on the board. We can immediately determine the result of this game. From what we know, yellow will play the last disc, thus claiming the threat and winning. Let's reimagine this game where instead, yellow has his threat on the 4th row. Notice how the exact same thing happens? Both players fill in the rest of the board until yellow gets to claim the threat which he was guaranteed to begin with. Let's back up a few moves. Notice how red and yellow are happy to play in the first 2 spaces of the center column? However, consider the marked space. Notice that neither player would ever want to play it. The fact that yellow wouldn't forfeit the threat here, and that equivalently, red wouldn't expose it for yellow to take, is very important. This means that both players are effectively bounded 2 spaces below the threat. Play in that column wouldn't continue above that point until there is no other option for either player. The same logic applies for any threat at all, not just 4th row threats. For completeness, let's take a look at a 2nd row yellow threat. Do you see the pattern? In this case, red has extremely good shape in the center of the board. However, none of that matters. Yellow's 2nd row major threats already seal red's fate. After the dead space fills, red is to play, forfeiting the game to yellow. Now let's see an example of a winning game for red. In this case, red's threat is on the 5th row, thereby guaranteeing him the victory. It should start to become clear that these threats matter the most when their row corresponds to the parity of the player who owns them. That is to say, red, who plays first, wants to have threats on odd rows, and yellow, who plays second, wants to have threats on even rows. We can construct an example in which players have all of these threats on the wrong rows. That is, red has threats on even rows, and yellow has threats on odd rows. And we immediately know that the game is predestined to tie. In this case, there are red threats on the 5th row and 3rd row, both of which are odd rows. This corresponds to red being player 1, the odd parity player. But we also notice that there is a yellow major threat on the 2nd row, also corresponding to the fact that yellow is the even player. Who will win? Naturally, it will be the first player to reach their threat. It is for this reason that we say that the red threats on the odd rows are undercut by the yellow 2nd row threat. Yellow will win because the game will be over before red's threats are ever available. It's as though the red threats aren't even there at all. Now, predicting who is going to win is great and all, but of course, once the threats are already in place, it's too late to change the course of the game. So, the appropriate time to use this knowledge is during the construction of these threats in the first place. This is an example from the candlestick's opening. It's Red's turn to move. Where is the best place to play? Red could play here, creating two even major threats, but those aren't very important to Red. Furthermore, Yellow then gets the opportunity to block what could have been a red odd row threat on the 5th row. Insofar as Red wants odd row threats more than even row threats, Red would have been better off not permitting Yellow to have blocked this potential winning threat. And, sure enough, it turns out that all of the moves for Red are correct, with the unique exception of the one which permits Yellow to block this critical threat. Let's see an example of how this game may play out if Red continues the sequence the right way. Sure enough, eventually the odd row threat falls right into Red's hands. And what if Red gets it wrong by exposing the potential 5th row threat? Yellow blocks. Now, it's Red's turn to move. What should he do? Do you see the yellow threat about to be made on the 6th row? The only move which doesn't hand Yellow the victory is the one which blocks Yellow's even row threat on the 6th row. If Red blocks, the game will end as a tie since neither player has an appropriate threat. Otherwise, Yellow will win on the 6th row. This is what the continuation looks like if Red blocks. At first glance, it looks like the player who is favored is that same player who has a threat on the row of their favored parity. All of these examples which we have seen so far have been evidence in favor of this claim. Well then, what should we think of this example here? Just like the example in which Red was undercut, it features both players having at least one threat on their appropriate parity. Again, Red's threat on the 5th row is above the yellow threat on the 4th row. Does this mean that Red is undercut? On the right side, yes, but on the left side, no. The left side threat isn't even on the same column. Getting to that left side 5th row threat doesn't somehow require passing through the right side yellow threat, like it would have if they were in the same column. What should we expect then? Both players have what they want to win, but of course they can't both win. Should we expect a tie? Let's see what happens. Both players begin by filling the dead space under the threats, leaving us here with Yellow to move. Yellow now has a decision to make. Either expose the red threat on the left, immediately forfeiting the game, or forfeit his own 4th row threat on the right. The latter sounds less terrible, but the result is the exact same, in that we now have a single red threat on Red's favored row. This is all to say, this position was Red's to begin with. But why? What's different between the two players' positions that gives Red the advantage here somehow? This is best explained by a somewhat abstract concept called the Zugzwang. It's a German term originally used in chess to describe a position in which one would prefer to simply pass for their turn. Take a look at our position once the dead space is filled again. We can say that Yellow is in Zugzwang because in this position, Yellow would prefer to just skip the turn and let Red move, so that Red is forced to either forfeit the red threat or reveal the yellow threat. Alas, this is not permitted, and Yellow is forced to make a losing move. Is there an example then of Red falling prey to a Zugzwang? Consider this position. Yellow doesn't even have a threat on his beloved even row, with just 2 odd row threats. Red, on the other hand, has a threat on an appropriate row, the 5th row in correspondence with his parity. Surely Red should win here, but the result is not quite what we expect. Once the dead space is filled, it's now Red's turn, and Red finds himself in the Zugzwang. Regardless of the column, a red piece will expose either one of the 2 yellow threats. The The red threat on the 5th row doesn't even have any effect on the position. It is completely nullified by the yellow threats on the 3rd row. It is for this reason that yellow can be said to control the Zugzwang. Now that we have learned this new tool of analysis, how do we generalize it? In which positions does one find himself in the Zugzwang? The answer is a little bit complicated, but the gist is that on top of each player wanting threats of their parity, both players gain some advantage by having odd row threats. Odd row threats turn out to be just a little bit stronger. We'll clarify on exactly what that means in the next video. But before you go, I want to make a point of the key idea here. It doesn't matter how many spots are left open on the board, how many columns remain empty, or whose turn it is. Once you are sufficiently far into the game where all threats have been developed, you can always predict the results of the game totally deterministically, only by knowing the list of open threats and the parity of the rows which they lie on. No other information is needed. This is an enormous relief of mental burden in the endgame. Once you get comfortable thinking about threats and their parities, you will never need to actually read the game to completion ever again. We have now developed the theoretical ideas to explain, given a set of threats, who we should expect to win. In the next video, we will abstract this theoretical understanding to apply to all sets of starting threats, and crystallize them into win conditions, or concise rules which deterministically tell us, given a complex set of threats on different rows, who is favored as the winning player. Be sure to stay tuned. This has been 2Swap.